Welcome to this webinar on how transformative technologies are a risk hedge in the COVID-19 era. We have two panelists for our discussion today. They are Blake from Blake Digital Capital and Hein Hattingh from Into Assets. Let me tell you a little bit about Howard first. Howard is the director of Blake Digital Capital, a business advisor who has been instrumental in the adoption of new technologies in the realm of virtual property auctions for Into Assets. And Hein is the managing director of Into Assets with over 20 years of experience in the real estate industry and is one of the first to take property auctions into the digital space. So welcome to you both, Howard and Hein.
I'd like to welcome all the viewers and listeners today and hope they're going to enjoy the discussion, and there'll be plenty of takeaways from it, no doubt. Please just bear in mind it's an interactive discussion, and we welcome you to post questions as we go along. Use the question prompt on the Q&A feature, and Ellen will moderate them and put them to us, and then we'll be able to answer whatever you have, but you're welcome to comment as we go along.
Super. I'll be here in the background and address any of those questions and answers and forward them through to you as and when they come through, Howard and Hein. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So as we said, we'd like to just welcome you all here today, and we're very grateful to have Hein along with us to discuss this issue of transformative technology, which we must say during this COVID era has been rapidly accelerated into all our lives, and we've had to make a few adjustments along the way, and we're getting used to a couple of things too. But Hein, thank you very much for your time today and for joining us. We are looking forward to a great discussion. Just to set some background, Hein is the managing director of a company called Into Assets, as Ilan told us. And Hein, if you may, would you mind just giving us some background on how the company was formed and what your journey's been up to the stage when we took the decision to digitize the business and bring it into the digital realm?
Yeah, thank you, Howard. Thanks for hosting us, and Ilan, thanks for facilitating this. We as Into Assets was established in 2012. I was previously involved with another auctioneering company, and predominantly we were just stuck into property auctions when we started, and predominantly in KZN only. And at that stage, I think it was about 2 years ago, I met with you and together with our chairman, and I told you that I'm very concerned that our business model is a dangerous model, because we were only doing property auction predominantly in KZN, and we would like to differentiate ourselves with different kind of options and not stuck into the auction of properties, and that we would like to move into the tech space and become totally a tech company and digitize our services. That's what triggered this whole change into the new digital world.
Hein, and it's been a very interesting journey, because Into Assets was a very, very staid auction practice, in the sense that you ran your auctions from physical locations. You got Andrew, who's a tremendous auctioneer, running the event, and it was a gavel, what we always refer to in the consulting phase as a gavel drop business. Once the gavel dropped, the property was sold, and that's how we had taken the value proposition to market. It was singly through that very physical auction channel. It's been quite a change, because, and we're going to get into more of this detail a little bit later on, but the change has been fairly dramatic. Not only is it this virtual auction product, but there's a whole lot of other initiatives that are happening in the background that we're going to get to, that have really moved the business dramatically from a very physical auction experience to one that is really digitally enabled. This process has required tremendous commitment from shareholders. Could you give us some insight, just from a financial point of view? Often people don't understand the extent of the commitment from a shareholder to invest back into their business and reinvent it, and what they were prepared to. Of course, you sacrifice dividends, you sacrifice income to be able to achieve that. Can you give us some insight into what was the extent of that for you to make this investment in these new digital channels?
Yes, Howard. So when we started with revolutionizing all our services, I mean, I started realizing what it's going to cost. And I frequently had to convince our shareholders, we 6 shareholders, to convince them to go into this high costing, etc. I think from a costing point of view, and this is only expenses that we paid in the last 18 months since we started, I had to convince the shareholders to take, and what the policy that we have taken up is to rather use the profits of the company. I don't want to tell you how much money we spent, but I would say that roughly we've taken about 60% of the annual net profit of the company and just investing it into this new technology, which is quite high. And in particular these times now with the COVID-19, you have to have a war chest, and it feels like we've taken the money out of the war chest and put it into the investments. But I can convincingly say that I think it was the right move, it was the right expense, and we can only capitalize on that big investments that we've done over the last 18 months.
And that's a substantial number by anyone's standards. I'm also a shareholder and invested in many businesses, and to be able to agree to take 60% of a net profit, because that hits people straight in their pockets. There's no dividend, or there's a substantially reduced dividend by 60% going back to shareholders, and that's ostensibly while they invested in businesses. So I don't think it's an understatement. We said it's an absolute leap of faith. It's trust, and it's the hope that the results justifies what you've done. But I suppose if we'd had a crystal ball, we would have done it without even blinking. Had we seen the events of COVID-19 coming down towards us, because you're sitting in a differentiated business. And that's what we're going to get onto now, is the extent to which you are differentiated. And just so the viewers understand, because they don't have all the background to what we did, is we went into a consulting phase and we identified how we were going to digitally differentiate the company called Into Assets, of which Hein is a shareholder. And how do we move them from this single location, single event environment into a multiple revenue driver based digital solution? And that's where they have landed up at the moment. And we've touched on it. I mean, we've just touched on the fact that we've virtualized that auction process. Hein, I want to deal with them one at a time, just so the audience knows there are 3 additional revenue drivers that we have built into the business. And these 3 additional revenue drivers are the virtual auction. So that allows people to attend an auction virtually like we are today. We could literally be sitting and bidding on the assets that are on the auction from anywhere in the world, and we've widened that audience. We're going to get into that detail just now. The second one is we have built a portal called CapX2, CAPX and numeral 2, which is a property portal that allows people to place their properties for rent, sale, or auction through a link into Hein's domain. And this is an accumulated portal, and it's the first time it's been done in the commercial, industrial, and agricultural property space. And then there's, on the back of the virtual auctions, there's also timed auctions, which allows people to place their assets on the website and within Hein's portal, and allows them to, over time, so we open the window of opportunity, say for a week, where people view these properties, and thereafter a window of opportunity opens and people bid on it. So there's another revenue driver sitting in there. Hein, the absolute byproduct of all of this has been the data, the value of the data, because we, in these processes, in this digital re-engineering of this business, we've created revenue drivers that attract data, and we're able to store this data, analyze it, and return it to the people that utilize our services to give them deep insights into what's going on in the property market. And I think this is the first time this has happened. So Hein, if we go back now and we start on just purely on the virtual auction play, how do you foresee this playing a role? I know you've run one, so let's just tell the audience you've run the first one. Will you just take us through what your experience was on having run that first digital auction? How did you as an investor in this process, in this product, feel at the close of that auction and during it?
Yes, Howard, that's, I mean, the virtual auction, I think, is a big differentiating factor. There's quite a lot of online auctions been happening all over the world. But I think by bringing in the virtual auction side of it, it just gives you more energy towards an auction than a static kind of online auction, although there is place for an online time auction. But I do feel that the virtual kind of aspect to the auction is going to slowly move people into the online space. So it makes it easier. It's reality. The auctioneer is there. You download an app and you can sit in New York and you can participate in our auction happening in Durban of any property all over the country. So, but it just brings that like a more energy and that liveliness to an auction compared to the static auction. Our first auction was on I think it was the 25th of February. It's very close to how disaster that happened now. And that was a highly successful auction. We actually had 2 bids from, I think one from Johannesburg and some from some other place. 2 bids that were the winning bids at that auction, which is a facility that we never had. We had to have like a telephone calls and the old traditional ways of auction. I mean, it was really an eye-opener and a great success.
And Han, I was obviously, as a team, we were all there to auction and very eager to see how our new piece of technology was going to work. The challenge was we had prior, because of the speed at which we implemented. I mean, just for the audience's benefit, we signed with the vendor basically a month before that auction and asked them to have it ready with the app development and everything, which was absolutely amazing. And we'd like to thank the team at SwiftV who made this all possible. Russell Luck, if you're listening, thank you. Personal thank you to you, because the auction was an absolute success. The only downside was we never had time to go to the market. We never had time to hit social media and the traditional media channels that you advertise through to really get the word out that we were going to be running this virtual product. And yet, I know you've mentioned the 2 bids that you've had, but Han, did we not have overseas interest as well? Were there not people outside of the country that were participating, maybe not bidding, but participating in the auction?
Yeah, you see how I mean, the beauty of the whole product is that we had a seller. I mean, in particular, that auction, we had a seller who was from Saudi Arabia, and he was at that point of time, he was in London. And it's not only from a buyer's perspective, the seller can also sit overseas and he can see exactly what is happening on the auction floor with his particular property. So yeah, it's an absolute eye-opener, and to me, there's no other way to go this route. And what I can add also is that this product that we do have is that there's absolute real time on the second, because the auction goes quite fast. You can't have that kind of a little bit of hesitation and lack of timing. It has to be like an absolute on the second real time, because the auctioneer is moving quite quickly, and the online bidding has to keep track of that. And this system is exactly what that is been doing.
Yeah, I mean, we watched it in action. It was really impressive. We've been a little bit tripped up by COVID, but you know what? In a way, we tripped up, but now we're able to run the first studio auction in a way, or the first virtual auction only, where it's just physically impossible to have participants present. And so the technology is going to be tested. When do you anticipate that first auction running without an audience like you normally used to having at the Durban Country Club, Han?
Yeah, our next auction, and it will be really the first studio auction that we've done it, because we were a bit hesitant. We didn't really know whether the time will be extended for the lockdown. And with that in mind, we decided to do the next auction not as an open platform auction where we normally hold it, but in a studio auction where our auctioneer will be sitting at our offices in the studio, and we will be submitting about 32 properties to auction on that side, and all the bidding, everything will be done from anywhere in the country or the world. Or in Durban itself, and it can be done from your app. So you don't need to be attending that auction, which ties in nicely with the whole disaster with the coronavirus.
Han, that's a substantial portfolio you're taking to market. That's a moment of boldness, and we congratulate you for taking such a large portfolio straight into the virtual world. But like you say, coronavirus has definitely sped us along and helped us to get to that point. Before we move to the next point, we'd just like to remind the audience that question prompts are welcome. You're welcome to click on the Q&A feature and ask Han or I anything you want if it interests you about this process that we're discussing. Han, to move to the next point, the natural progression from, well, not the natural progression, an additional capability, and in your case, in the business revenue driver, is for us to go to a full-blown studio auction, which, as you've just told us, is going to be tested now under COVID. How do you foresee it in the future? You migrating from a very physical, personal, engaging experience at a single location. You've now invited the world as your audience in via a digital solution. You're now going to do the first pure studio digital play auction at the end of this month. But once COVID's gone, how are all these things going to balance out? How are you going to choose whether you're going to go virtual only or you're going to go terrestrial in a fixed location with a broadcast capability and a virtual interface? How are you going to, what strategy are you going to adopt to balance these capabilities out?
Yeah, I think I were to phase it in. We still like the old traditional auction, and you can facilitate people to bid from anywhere, so you don't have to come to our physical auction attend it. It facilitates now for people not to attend it. So we're not going to totally move away from the traditional auction platform, because I think by doing that also it will slowly move people and people who are not used to the online space and educate them into the online space where you have an online time auction. But as I said, I do feel that the pure static kind of online auction loses that energy towards an auction, a live auction. So I do like the virtual side of the auction. But there are properties that might be remote, etc. We will also look at specific kind of properties. We specialize in commercial, industrial, and agricultural properties. And we might have like on residential properties, which are in different areas, and those kind of property auctions we will do purely on an online basis. It doesn't need a lot of infrastructure and resources on that day, and we can. I mean, the whole intention is also that we have volume. We're going to be volume driven in respect of the pure online auction. I do find out also that from the financial institutions, there's a huge demand for that specific kind of auction, to just have like a timeline online auction for those kind of properties. So we're going to look at values and the nature of the property, and then we'll make a decision. But the nice thing about this is that we have options now. In the past, we didn't have options. Now we have a variety of options. I mean, we can do any property from anywhere in the world. Even if the bidders are not there, we can do a property. We can do any property wherever. So it leaves us with a vast amount of opportunities.
Thanks. And just as a matter of interest, and I hope I'm not blindsiding you with this question, but I know that the agricultural, your agricultural capabilities, your roots are deep in agriculture. And to remind the audience, we are commercial, industrial, and agricultural play. Do you in the future think that maybe because we are now introducing these new capabilities, that we might find something like agriculture being spun off and building a agricultural specific product around maybe the virtual capability or the timed capability?
Yeah, I don't think that agricultural as I mean, we have done like in live auctions on the farms in the past, and we more and more feel that the agricultural has a different requirement in the country, and we're actually thinking of doing agricultural not only on a virtual auction basis or an online auction basis, but more on the old, like the old traditional kind of tender process. We're strongly thinking of bringing that into our, and we're busy developing a tender process. We don't have that traditional envelope Dropbox kind of old-fashioned tender, but this will be also be digitized, and it will be like an encryptic offer that can be done, so that if somebody submits an offer, nobody else can see on the deadline what other offers have come in. Because there's a little bit of negativity and mistrust in that old tender process because people don't trust it. So if it's encrypted, you can do an audit afterwards and you can see that nobody can open or see the bid. And I do feel that the farmers in particular really prefer this kind of option than putting a property just on an auction and an open public forum. And the people that there is still a connotation also in agriculture of the people thinking that if I take my farm to an auction, it's a distressed auction, and all my neighbors will think I'm in trouble. So this is really to facilitate and have it to more like a secret kind of offer. And nobody knows who's bidding on it effectively. I really think that's the way to go forward with agriculture.
Okay, well, that's interesting. It's just an interesting opportunity to just discuss something on the side there, because we know that the agriculture does play an important part of your business, and it's a very specific market that requires very specific services. And it sounds like you're going to become in the tender process the Bitcoin of the agricultural world, and that's another exciting development that we're going to be looking forward to as you go along. Can we talk a little bit about timed auctions? I know, because it's slightly different. So just to recap, we've done the blended auction where we're looking at timed and sorry, not timed. We're looking at the physical auction plus the virtual auction capability, people able to bid from anywhere in the world. The virtual only, which is happening later this month, and then the timed auction. I just want to explore maybe the significance of distressed property and timed auction functionality.
Yeah, as I said, I think that the timed or the timeline auction is it allows you to have high volumes. I mean, you can have an auction every day of your life. You can have an auction and you can have a few properties every day. It does not require all the resources of an auctioneer and the whole admin team, your videos and all that kind of technology that goes with a virtual auction. So it's an easy and a simple way, and that is where we can really bulk it up from a volume point of view. As I said, I also think there's a huge appetite from the financial institutions that's the way they would like to do it. The costing is better, but it's also, I mean, we specialize in property. We have to make the call whether it's going to be a virtual and online auction, and there are certain requirements which one fits in where, and that's why we make ourselves out to be experts in that field.
Thank you, Hein. It looks like we've got our first question coming through. Ilan, are you ready?
Yes, Howard, I do. We actually have two questions, and I'll read out the first one. It comes from Darren Wright. He says, could you please share a few examples of the key risks and issues you came across during such an implementation and how you evaluated and or mitigated these?
Thank you, Darren. The key risks that we faced, and Hein can talk to them afterwards. I think some of the key risks are when you moving from a traditional auction based the way Hein and them were used to. There's always risk in going into a fully virtualized environment, and that fully virtualized environment was very hard for us to find. We really looked for about a year before we could find the partner that we did, who was able to virtualize that process for us and enable us to go to the market. I'm sure you could imagine how unappealing it would have been had we gone to market and we had the wrong vendor and a person's trying to bid and there's a delay. So we had to make sure that those bids came through instantaneously, no matter where they were being bidded on the world, because these are live auctions sometimes. And different in a purely virtual environment, because then you can rely on the pure virtual environment. So the one risk by blending them was definitely that the bidders were able to put their bids and get their bids recorded in time by hitting the big red button on their app. Hein, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk is that we thought at one stage we're going to run out of money. So it's a very costly exercise. So the big challenge also, as you said, I mean, is to get the right technology. We've been talking to a lot of people in Australia and America and trying to get the right tool to do this. And through the technology that we had, and it was really because of that instantaneous kind of bidding process to get that kind of it. That was the biggest challenge. Just from a challenge point of view, it is a phasing in of your normal bidders and sellers at an auction, and particular bidders that has to build trust in the system, because a lot of people think that there might be other kind of shenanigans going on with online bidding, but I mean that is not happening. I think it's the people just adapting to it. I think it's even more secure than the old traditional auctions. So, but it is an educational issue, and people just have to be educated. So, but I mean, we had the first two auctions and we didn't have any problems. So, I don't think it's going to be a problem, guys.
So just to carry on from Darren's question, Darren, we were also very nervous that we didn't know how this is still a process we engage with and an active risk, so it's something that's going on right now. We didn't know whether we would arrive on the first blended auction and find no one in the audience and everyone sitting at home. We're also very careful when we film the auctions that we don't film individuals, because lots of bidders are concerned about their privacy, and we have to take that into account. So there's a lot of etiquette and a lot of thoughtfulness that goes into making the physical and virtual environment not only workable but also appealing for bidders and sellers and bidders to be able to be engaged in. I think for Hein and them as shareholders, they were from a financial point of view, as I'm sure you know, once you start the development process, it's how long is that piece of string? There's so many things you don't take into account when you kick the development off that has to then be completed in the phase of desperation, as I call it, the last mile when everything has to be done. So yeah, there were a few risks, and luckily we mitigated them all so far. We're very happy about that. And I see we now have a question coming in from YouTube Live.
Yes, that's right. Correct, Howard. So the question is coming from Paul Allen in Australia. He says, is the software you use for the live auctions proprietary, and how does it mitigate the delay factor?
No, we don't use proprietary software. We steered right away from it. We were contemplating building it, but the build time would have been a big risk for us. We had to get to market very quickly. We wanted to be an early adopter. In South Africa, we wanted to be the leader. And therefore we, as Hein said, we searched high and low to be able to find people that would be able to support us. And exactly the point you make, we had to find that piece of technology that when the bidder hit the button, the auctioneer could acknowledge it and register the bid. There's nothing worse than there being a delay. The buyers would just get frustrated, abandon the process and be gone. So as I understand the technology, and I'm hoping to do a follow-up at a later stage with the technology supplier, the person who built the software and the technology. It's a Google partner company, and get them on the show and be able to share that with you. But as I understand it, we have triple failover redundancy. So we're plugging into the fiber at the venue, and then we are also running a satellite link that complements it. So we could really be in the middle of nowhere with really bad telco and reception issues, and still be able to run an auction in an agricultural setting. And that was important for us because Hein wanted to be able to have the flexibility to move the auction to wherever it needed to be and wherever the property was, if that was required. It's a little less risky in the virtual studio environment because, of course, that's all set up and you can put that in a location that sits directly on top of fiber, and therefore you have a direct link. I think what people don't think about sometimes is that sometimes the area from which the person is bidding might be signal challenged or connectivity challenged, and that could be a challenge. So I think for the bidder, it's important for them to be in an environment where they're able to bid successfully using the technology. I hope that answers that question. Hein, if we can just go back to what we were discussing earlier, the significance of a timed auction. If we think through the significance of a timed auction, I know you're not in the residential space, but I do know from our chats with the banks that properties in possession are a massive issue. And you don't think that your timed auction might in time be a solution for a bank who has properties in possession and wants to clear property quickly, ethically, and transparently?
Yeah, absolutely. As I've said, we've already seen some keen interest from some of the financial institutions and banks, and that's the way they want to go. And as I say, we have this option that we can on a very quick basis, we can roll out. And if we have new properties, we can load it on a very quick basis with little resources. We absolutely geared for volumes. And what I can understand from the banks, that is where the key kind of focus is going to be for them, unfortunately, after this time. And it also looks like that they're not going in for just because of the coronavirus now, but it's more people that have been in arrears even long before this disaster has struck us. So they're sitting, unfortunately, with big volumes, and this is where the platform of the online auction will be. And as you said, I mean, the transparency point of view, the marketing point of view, the social media marketing of those property and pedestaling those property into the market is exactly the same as the other auctions that we're doing. It's the only thing that you don't have that require that auctioneer to physically do that auction. So it's well catered for volumes. With the same kind
our audience will be really excited because you talk about transparency and security around bids. The blockchain initiative that you're currently exploring would really be a game changer. And, you know, for a company that was struggling to digitize a couple of months ago to having all these solutions available, you've taken an absolute quantum leap into the fourth industrial revolution, jumped in boots and all, and well done to you and the team for having the vision to do that. If we could move on to CapEx 2, do you want to explain to our audience? Remember at the start we said that obviously the virtual product around the auction, the physical auction is all there, but this property portal, this CapEx 2 product that you've developed, and would you like to explain to the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, just in brief and in summary, I mean, it's something totally different than the auction side of business, but we felt that there's a huge vacuum in the market in respect of commercial, industrial, and agricultural properties from a portal point of view. I mean, we have two dominant residential property portals that everybody does, but we felt that it's totally lacking from the commercial, industrial side of it. Even if we have auctions, we advertise through the portals, we feel that we're not getting the kind of leads that we're getting from the predominantly residential portals, and that's why we've decided to do a portal just specializing in that. So it will not be for residential, only commercial and industrial, and it also gives access to both selling and letting also. So we do not do any transactions on that portal. Obviously, it's just people submitting their property. I also find out that virtual aspect of that is coming more into play. People can advertise their properties there. They can't do it at the moment. They have to go through residential portals to do that. And they can also sit from wherever they are and submit their properties, and we will give them all the tools to easily do that. And then we've built in quite a lot of differentiating factors also there, which will be even much more advanced than the residential portals at the moment.
Han, you want to just give us a little insight into those differentiating factors? I know some of them, and I think especially the ones around credit assessment, that those are very important. Would you like to just talk us through one of them or two of them if you feel up to it?
Yeah, I mean, the first differentiating kind of factor, or the upside of it, is that we specialize in a total new field, which will be the first in the country to go that route. I think we're the only ones, almost on a global basis, that's just focused on commercial, industrial, and agricultural. And then we do find out that there's a lot of discrepancies in the other platforms where people are not getting quality leads. So we will be vetting. We have built-in systems with our partners also in vetting your buyers. We're screening, we're qualifying our buyers. We identify the LSM group or where people are, so that you can not have a property of 20 million rand with people, with a person earning 5,000 Rand a month who can't afford it. So we limit the people to see that you have really vetted and well qualified buyers being taken to the seller without wasting their time. So we're working with solid people. We also do credit checking with people. We will be doing the kind of bond origination will be built in there. And we'll be partnering up with a lot of other service providers who's in that property platform, in that arena, bring them in, partner with them, and have like a one-stop shop in respect of commercial, industrial, and agricultural properties.
So I'm sure what you just said now has piqued the interest of many people listening, because there's a whole value chain around properties with compliance certificates, security, and all sorts of other services that hang off the back of that. You mentioned bond origination, but there's definitely an opportunity for people to engage and speak with you about joining that value chain and being able to participate in the wider offering of CapEx 2. I see we have a new question, Ilan.
Yes, thank you very much, Howard. We have a question here that says, post the COVID-19 outbreak, how have you mitigated the impact on your business? Specifically, how did you achieve work from home capability, leveraging digital or hardware solutions to ensure continuity? Secondly, any successful negotiations for supplier price reductions, if any? And thirdly, any future business revenue opportunities that may have been unrealized pre-outbreak?
Oh, thank you. And I think just to answer the third part of that question, yes, definitely. There's been a lot of challenges that have been presented by it, but we're going to get to a little bit later on. But I'll let Hein speak to some of the strategic ones that we mentioned at the start. Hein, any cost reductions that you've experienced, and how's the work at home initiative going?
Yeah, we're fortunate to have, like, from a infrastructure point of view, and in particular for CapEx 2. I mean, we need very limited resources from the CapEx 2 side of it. There's actually, I mean, there's almost one person that can run and launch this whole CapEx 2 from that point of view. So we don't need a lot of resources. But I think by sitting at home, I've just realized how much quality time you have. And I mean, the whole idea and vision that we have is that we would like to do like a national and global work, and we can do it from a very centralized office. We don't have to go out over the show. What happened, like in agricultural, for instance, is that we had to get into a plane and fly to the Northern Cape and do auctions there, etc. That's not necessary. So it's becoming much more cost efficient. And where we normally have, just from that supply kind of deduction, discount that we can give, is that it's much cheaper for somebody to submit their properties now either to an online timeline auction or to the tender process, and in compared to the old way of auctions that we've done in the past. So it's going to be much less costly for anybody to submit a property. So it's not only a benefit from a convenience point of view, but also from a cost point of view.
Yes, and also to address other aspects of that question, we've right from the start, it was actually going to be the next point I was going to get onto. So to answer the question at the same time, to ask you the next question, Hein, the leanness and the agility of what was deployed is really quite something special. So we know that during this entire process, as we consulted and we built these different elements, we were very guarded not to grow head office. That was absolutely, we didn't want to grow our wage bill, and we didn't want to start adding a whole lot of people. So we took a decision to go and use external parties to help us do it. So CapEx 2 was developed externally, and we'd like to thank the virtual agent, Terence Suraj, and his team for having developed CapEx 2 for us. And of course, Swiftly and Russell Luck putting the virtual auction piece together. But Hein, is it correct from my memory? I think we only added one additional person to payroll during this entire process. Is that correct?
Yeah, we only employed one person who will be championing the CapEx 2 side of it. So yeah, we're going to have more volumes, and we can make use of exactly the same infrastructure that we have. I mean, the virus and this disaster has just shown us what technology can do, and I think a lot of people are going to replan after this And luckily, we're already ready for that. It almost looks like we predicted for a disaster like that, but obviously that's not true.
Yes, and it was very interesting, Hein, to pick up on the point. We know the business schools teach the marginal cost economy, and we're seeing marginal costing creeping into your business now, where we're able to take a much deeper service at a far cheaper price to the market that you service. And that really, I mean, in many respects, everything that we've done has ticked all the boxes and allowed us to explore these things and not only grow the business, because if we look at the revenue drivers and we haven't counted in the data, we'll leave the data for another day. That's an entirely different discussion. Maybe we need to get Terence Suraj onto the channel to take us through the data modeling. But apart from that, just to be able to diversify the service and take it to a much, much wider audience. This is what's happened. We've taken a product that was really regionally bound, and it's now going to a much, much larger audience. Hein, do you think this is going to be, was going to assist you with marketing outside the region?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, the data is the underpinning kind of engine that we are driving the whole business from. So we have a transaction side of it. We've always just been acting as brokers or agents by way of auctioneering, but now we have also like a whole total different field where we will be extracting kind of data, build a whole big database. And the bigger your database is and the more specialized it is, it's so much easier to do your marketing through a bigger platform. It's not just an auction side of it, but it's a total all spectrums of the commercial, industrial, and agricultural fields. So obviously we will be feeding and capitalizing from the new capex too. So we're quite excited because that will add a lot of value to into assets.
Yeah, and not only that, we're looking at of course, from a business consulting point of view, not only have we added the additional revenue drivers to the business, which will result in additional revenues and hopefully profits that come out of that once you've paid off all the establishment costs, but we've completely differentiated this business. It's a completely different business. And I think something that's quite interesting for the audience to realize is, Han, without insulting you and the team, or myself for that matter, would it be incorrect of me to say that the median age of the shareholders is about 58, and you've taken a project on that's normally the preserve of younger millennial people, and it certainly is refreshing to see the adoption and the execution of this. Are there any, if there's no other or further questions, we're going to go to the wrap-up. So Han, just from my point of view, thank you very much for participating today. I think everyone's found it highly informative, and there's certainly more to follow. Han, would you be happy for us to do a follow-up on this, just to let people know how we're progressing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was, in particular, in these quiet times at home, it's been a fantastic forum, and thanks for facilitating through you and through Elan. I think it's quite a good platform to do it. I mean, you're talking about age and new technology, and we had to adapt with. I mean, today I've become the first Zoomer of my age, and I never thought that I would become a Zoomer at my age.
Well, you've been inducted into the Hall of Fame, Han. You are now a well-established Zoomer, and Zoom has made this all possible along with Elan and the technology, and we'd like to thank everybody for participating with us this afternoon and taking the time to share with us, and we'll certainly keep you informed in the near future of the other interesting topics that we're going to be covering on the Blake Digital Capital channel. And we shortly going to be having Han back to tell us how his auction went. And maybe as the products develop, we'll be able to come back and give you an update on a regular basis. So to everybody out there that took the time to listen to us, thank you very much. Until next time, bye-bye.